Now, the Labour Party is cracking down on the 4-day working week. The Community Secretary, Steve Reid, he's blasted South Cambridgeshire Council, that's run by the Liberal Democrats, saying he's deeply disappointed with its decision to give staff full pay for fewer hours. Well, he's now demanding answers amid claims that the shorter week is impacting output, as another 25 councils across the nation are said to be eyeing up the move. Well, I'm joined now by the head of campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance, Elliot Keck. Elliot Keck, the 4-day working week, the socialist utopian dream, has been knocking around forever. I say, if you're a private company, you're graphic designers in Brighton, crack on. Do what you want. But this is on the taxpayer's dollar. Why should I, as a council taxpayer, pay somebody 5 days a week when they only work 4?
Yeah, it really is that simple, and it's bizarre how long it's taken the Labour government to wake up to this fact, but they are actually waking up to this fact, to be fair to them. It's not often the TPA are praising the Labour Party or a Labour minister, but actually Steve Reid has absolutely done the right thing here. It's a shame that they didn't do this earlier, so there was this, the last government had this essentially called a best value notice in place on this council, on this rogue council conducting this experiment on their residents like their guinea pigs. And this best value notice essentially required this council to provide the government with regular updates about how they were doing. One of the first things Angela Rayner did when she came to the job was she removed that best value notice. That was a ridiculous thing to do. It was clear this council had gone rogue. The government had this fantastic opportunity to improve the lives of the residents of South Cambridgeshire. They didn't take it. But Steve Reid actually, he's come into the position and he's looking at this council and he's thinking, why on earth? If they claim we're on the side of the working people. Well, working people are paying their council tax for a full-time council, and they deserve a full-time council.
Joe Ryle is the campaign director for the 4-Day Week Foundation. They've locked horns with him in the past. Elliot Keck, he was on the show earlier on. He said, well, even bin men in this area, we're saying is amazing. So they get all of their work done in 4 days. I went, great. Let's pay them for 4 days. Why pay them to have why pay them 5 days when they're a bunch of part-time Charlies? And
I'm absolutely in favour of that. If it is the case that in councils actually there's only enough work for all of the staff to do 4 days, then brilliant. Cut the pay bill by 20%. That's fantastic. Allows you to cut council tax. Yeah, we talk about the crisis of funding in local government. Well, if genuinely your staff are only doing 4 days a week, 4 days work a week, 20% cut to the pay bill, and suddenly that council funding crisis that we talk about, it's not necessarily solved overnight, but it makes a big difference. So absolutely, I say to local government across the country, if you genuinely think you can cut your staff hours by 20% and cut the pay bill by 20%, let's look at that. But the idea of paying them 5 days work for 5 days work, 5 days pay, for 4 days work, I mean, that's just madness.
Nigel Nelson, it is madness. Why should people be allowed to work part-time on the taxpayer's dime?
Well, first of all, it's a question of whether productivity goes up or not. What you want done is you want the job completed. It doesn't really matter to residents, when you talk about the bin men, when that job is actually done, as long as they get their bins collected every week. If you look at the experiments that have been done with this, when 61 companies a couple of years ago trialled a 4-day week, sick days went down by 65% on average across the board, and 9 out of 10 companies, after the trial was finished, carried on with it. So the key is it doesn't suit every industry, but when you can actually show that productivity goes up when you do it, or at least remains the same, why should people work an extra day for no reason?
Is it true, Elliot, that productivity... Look, explain to me in simple terms. If you've got 10 potholes to fill, how can you do them? They need to be filled all the time. Not 80% of the time.
Council is a 24-hour service, right? Let's say you need emergency repairs in your social housing and it's something in the middle of the night. You need a council to be 24/7. So, just very bluntly, if they're only doing 4 days work and 5 days of pay, then they should be working harder, or you should be cutting the number of staff.
On your example, then we've got a problem at weekends because, if they're 24/7, they've got to actually be available 7 days a week. Of course you have that kind of cover available. What you're saying there is where it is possible to bring it in and where you don't lose any productivity out of it, what is the objection to people doing that, especially if it brings sickness rates down, it helps recruitment and helps retention?
So the evidence in South Cambridgeshire is very paltry. To go back to the private sector evidence that was done, the private sector survey that was done, that was already a selection of businesses that essentially self-selected for being 4-day working week businesses. Lots of them were already on 4-day working week. So yes, the survey did show that most of them had a good experience and most of them continued with it. But a lot of them, this was a self-selecting group of businesses. It wasn't a randomized control study of businesses across the country. And, local government and public sector is just a fundamentally different beast. We need our NHS working 24/7. We need our police working 24/7. We need our fire service working 24/7. Yeah. And when we haven't seen productivity increase in the public sector for 25 years, the idea that simply taking a day off their working week is going to suddenly, you would need a 25% increase in productivity to make up for that 20% reduction in working hours. That's not going to happen.
We have to leave it there. My house is burning down. Well, we can't come round. It's Thursday. That's nonsense. Elliot Keck, Nigel Nelson, thank you very, very much indeed.